We're into the 7th week of Philip Polkinghorne's High Court murder trial. The Crown has attempted to paint the 71-year-old as a drug-addled sex fiend who spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on sex workers. Its case is that Polkinghorne lashed out in 2021 and strangled his wife, Pauline Hanna, before staging the scene to make it look like a suicide. His defence has offered an alternative narrative. Polkinghorne's lawyer, Ron Mansfield KC, has been blunt in his assessment of why his client has ended up in court charged with murder. He told the jury that during an investigation spanning 16 months, police became intoxicated by salacious details of sex and drugs and transfixed in their belief that Hanna was murdered. Mansfield suggested the police should have stood back and viewed the case objectively. If they did, he claimed, they would have seen there was no evidence at all of homicide.
The focus became not of learning of what actually happened, but instead seeking to prove a crime that hadn't happened. Because can I suggest it's easy in a trial such as this, where there is evidence of drug use by a professional in one of the more comfortable suburbs in Auckland, to get distracted by that evidence?
Mansfield told the court methamphetamine is of course illegal and that it may have shocked or disappointed members of the jury that Dr. Polkinghorne used such a drug. But he urged the jury not to judge his client over what he called recreational or social use of meth, or because the couple's relationship was unconventional.
Those two features, namely drug use, which has only been established on a social or recreational level, and sexual experiences outside the union of their marriage, has been an entire distraction, both for the New Zealand Police and, if we're not careful, for you.
Mansfield, who said from the outset that Hanna died after committing suicide, called various experts, including a retired forensic pathologist from Australia, to bolster his argument. Professor Stephen Cordner was unequivocal in his opinion, saying the evidence points to a hanging.
There's no evidence of a forensic pathology kind to positively support a conclusion that this deceased has been homicidally, manually or ligaturally killed.
Professor Cordner's conclusion was not endorsed by two other pathologists who gave evidence for the Crown. Cordner told the court if Pauline died after being strangled by Polkinghorne, as has been contended by the Crown, you'd expect to see obvious injuries.
Absolutely expect to see abrasions or bruises associated with fingernails, fingertips, whether it's from the front or back.
Homicidal manual strangulation, do we expect to see clear external and internal injuries to the neck as a result of that?
That's what you expect to see, yes.
And no such injuries present in this case.
That's right.
But under questioning from the Crown, Cordner admitted he could not rule out that a scratch on Polkinghorne's forehead could have been caused by a fingernail. He also accepted that Hanna's use of sleeping pills and alcohol on the night she died could have reduced her ability to defend herself.
The degree of sedation in a victim is certainly a relevant factor to the degree of resistance that they can put up, and to use your terminology, whether that victim is unable to fight back. It's a factor, isn't it?
It is a factor.
One of Mansfield's key witnesses was Pauline's younger sister, Tracy Hanna. She claimed her sister told her she had attempted suicide in the early 1990s, shortly after the death of their father. One of Pauline's longtime friends also gave evidence, telling the court 3 months before her death she was stressed and struggling with work. Mansfield then zeroed in on what he called a cocktail of risk factors, arguing this increased Pauline's risk of suicide. He used another Australian expert witness to advance this argument.
Disclosing contemplating suicide and a previous episode of self-harm would indicate a far greater probability of subsequent suicide.
That previous occasion, you're talking about the information that had been obtained from her sister Tracy Hanna.
Yes.
So they're quite significant things that we would need to bear in mind regarding the potential risk of suicide for Ms. Hanna or Mrs. Polkinghorne.
Yes, just again, there's probability of a large group, but it does suggest that she is in a higher risk group just from those details alone.
And then on top of that, we've got the cocktail of medication and alcohol.
Yes.
We've got work pressures, depending on what the jury make of work pressure evidence.
Oh no, it's significant, especially if there is the potential for things to go really wrong and for there to be public disgrace for a person who's very proud of their work.
And then on top of that, the recent death of her mother, to whom she was very close.
And again, it's a very significant event.
From what you've told us, there were a number of factors that increased the risk of suicide for her.
Yes.
An email written in 2020 by Pauline Hanna was read to the court. She had written it to herself, as she often did. She said she didn't feel like she was adding any value at work. She said she tried to bring it up with her husband, but he wasn't interested. As a result, she said she had 3 glasses of wine and then said, who knows what might follow. At this point, Polkinghorne started quietly crying as he sat in the court listening. The court has heard much about Pauline Hanna's immaculate appearance, her busy, high-profile career responding to the COVID pandemic, and of a woman perceived to have been vivacious and outgoing. But Mansfield argued she was struggling, emphasising that she was a woman with chronic depression who abused alcohol, took sleeping pills and weight loss pills, and was under increasing pressure at work.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all the latest New Zealand Herald news. Click the subscribe button below or check out one of these videos and head over to nzherald.co.nz for more news worth knowing.